The following podcast is sponsored by Basico. At Basico, we understand your needs and pain points. Our expertise in CFO services, legal, finance IT, and people and payroll helps drive your business forward by inspiring change and challenging norms. We believe in deep explorative discussions and critical angles, the same spirit that fuels the Only Constant podcast hosted by our own Lasse Rindom. Discover more about Basico's vision and services at basico.dk. And if you like what you hear in this episode, please don't hesitate to share it with a friend. And now Lasse, take it away.
You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is David Pontoppidan, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Hi, David, and welcome to The Only Constant. I am really happy that you're here with me today, and I've been super looking forward to this episode. You are one of the smartest guys I think I've met over the last half year, and we've also had some strange connections with my wife and all that. You know her from her high school. Anyway, it's completely weird, actually. But you also the AI lead at SAP, so I think it's super interesting to have you here, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Lasse. It's a true privilege being here. And a little bit tough introduction to follow, saying I'm the smartest person you've met. You did qualify it with half a year.
And I said one of the smartest
people in the last 6 months, where you've primarily been spending your time indoors, not interacting with other people.
Except all the smart people I've met on my podcast. I think Carl Friston might actually beat you, to be honest. But also I think that one of the things you definitely did is that, and I hope we'll get back to that today, is that you a couple of days ago you left me a voice message on my phone, which was like 3 minutes about Foucault and biopolitics and AI, and I was like, what is that voice message about? So this is going to be a great episode, and I'm really happy to have you here.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
So after the last time we spoke, David, I went about enthusiastically speaking to people about how SAP is building AI into its portfolio. Because you told me about the way that you did it with knowledge graphs and how this end-to-end processes in ERP requires an end-to-end approach, that you go, for instance, SAP all the way, and then you get AI, because then the AI will know what's going on and the action space that it has because of the knowledge graph, because you're working in the same E2E system, right?
Yeah.
An unnamed source I spoke to, though, he's called it lipstick on a pig. Directly, which is a quite aggressive statement as well. SAP is one of the world's largest enterprise software suites and the most valuable company in Europe, or thereabouts. I don't know where they are right now at this moment. What do you think this man or this person implied with this comment? Sorry, but I will hold you up to this. Strategies acknowledging challenges as well. And how is he wrong?
You're just starting off, with the softballs here, aren't you, Lasse?
Completely softballs.
Yeah. Thank you. Lipstick on a pig, I think I'll take it. Pigs are smart animals, and they're loyal too. They dig up truffles that nobody else can find. They like to get their hands or their hooves or whatever dirty, which isn't always glamorous, by the way. But they go out and do it. And the thing about lipstick is you can use lipstick, you can use makeup to hide flaws. You can also use it to amplify things you're actually proud of. And I don't think we have anything to hide in SAP. I'm quite proud of our product. We've got 3/4 of the world's GDP flowing through our systems. We built those systems. We are helping some of the leading organizations in the world succeed in anything from manufacturing to supply chain to how they execute on their financial strategy to how they retain and hire and educate the best employees in the world and how they build a custom-centric portfolio. And I'm genuinely proud to be a part of that. Now, you have to bear in mind, sometimes what the end user is seeing is not actually the latest product. They might be looking at a product that was a wonderful product, is a wonderful product, but was developed 15 or 20 years ago, but hasn't been upgraded since. Or maybe that upgrade has happened elsewhere in the system and not in the actual user-facing interface. But that has no bearing on what the power of the system actually is and what it's able to do and accomplish. And we do have many customers around the world who are running the latest versions of our products as well. So I'd say that's probably where it comes from. But if you look at the lipstick, what the lipstick's actually either hiding or amplifying, I'd say over the last couple of years, SAP tore out a lot of the old plumbing and kept all the best parts, kept all the deep industry process expertise, kept all of the deep end-to-end insights that run across our business suite, which, as you mentioned correctly, is not just restricted to ERP, but goes across all of the different line of business solutions as well and how those generate value. And we did that by, first of all, with S4HANA, which is our flagship product for ERP, but also by taking S4 and moving it into not just an in-memory database, but moving it into a cloud-based in-memory database, what we call SAP HANA Cloud, and then taking ERP and essentially redesigning the reference architecture all the way from the infrastructure layer to the database layer to the virtualization layer, the OS layer, up to the application layer, and packaging that in a holistic cloud platform, which is, if you've heard of Cloud ERP, either Rise with SAP or Grow with SAP, that's what that is about. That's about taking a holistic cloud approach towards how you're running your most central data, your most critical business data. And then we built the business technology platform around that to make sure that when you develop extensions, when you develop custom code, that doesn't break future upgrades. That can happen outside of the actual SAP source code, outside of the actual SAP system. And then, as I said, around that, then the transformation tools to help you then succeed cross-suite, whether that's through enterprise architecture with what we call Lean IX, or through the process layer with what we call Signavio, or when it comes to onboarding and change management through what we call WalkMe. We have those capabilities then running again cross-suite and sitting on top of the business technology platform. And then onto all of that stuff, we then embed business AI. We embed artificial intelligence into every single end-to-end process. And we've done that over the last 1.5 years, 2 years. Thing's been going on, and it just feels like a lot longer, to be honest.
Well, 2 years, that's 2.5 years. That's some ChatGPT came out. So you were very quick out to decide you wanted to build some kind of Gen AI, I assume, capabilities into the platform. Half a year after the 3.5 launch?
Yeah, it wasn't even 3.5, was it? It was GPT-3, but yeah.
No, 3.5 in November, actually. Okay. I actually just looked that up yesterday to be very sure.
All right. I'll take your word for it. But yeah, we announced shortly after what we call Joule, which started off as, you could say, our primary interface into the SAP network, a kind of a co-pilot, if you will, or chatbot, or a way to interact with your data, and then has developed and transformed into actually being sort of the portal for multi-agent orchestration across all of these different applications. Because I think what's interesting is, as SAP is evolving this portfolio, and as artificial intelligence is evolving at a conceptual layer, what it encompasses beyond the algorithmic layer, beyond the statistical layer, how you actually manage the different components and make them valuable to you. We then developed what we call the business data cloud, and that's what you referred to, together with Databricks, where we are able to establish a single semantic truth across all of our applications and all the applications that aren't ours. That, for example, you're running competing companies' applications that are actually our competitors in the market. How you can establish a single semantic truth across all of those.
But better if you just stay within the SAP family, right?
Well, that's what I would say. That's what I would say, because then you have a lot of subsidiary benefits, but that's not going to happen for any customer in the world, that they're just going to run a single vendor. I'm also very aware of that, and SAP is very aware of that in our product strategy, which means you need the ability to have low friction data capture across all of those other competitors so that they can actually also establish a kind of co-opetition with you in the market. And once you have that semantic data layer in place, you're talking about the same thing when you say supplier, whether it's in one system or another. That means the same thing. Product means the same thing.
But you know, the AI needs the ability to navigate, and it has to have a map that's sort of consistent, right? And
so I would say I agree, and I would say that's not the map, but that's the legend. That's saying this is a street, that's an avenue, this is 1 kilometer. And then the map, that's what you refer to, the knowledge graph engine. That's the map. There's a knowledge graph engine says you have all of these different objects. You have suppliers, you have products, you have vendors, you have, warehouses, whatever, right? These are all nodes in a huge system. Think of a social network. And just like in a social network, they're all connected, which means that whatever a supplier delivers, right, that predicate, that's the edge of the node. And you map all of those relationships out. If you can map all of those relationships out, you have the map that you can apply the same legend to. And then you have a visual view of what your entire business universe looks like in terms of how these things interact. So let me just round off your question from prior and say, if it's lipstick on a pig, I mean, I'll take it, but I think it's probably closer, Lasse, to what I would say is full-on veterinary surgery than a visit to the...
But to be honest, he also said something else which I think is interesting, and maybe now I'm going to, he also said that the problem is that and the reason why he called it lipstick on a pig is also that SAP will not. I will be saving money by adding AI, right? So I'll usually, when I go do AI somewhere, the company will save some money, but you will not want them to save money on their SAP license necessarily, right? You still have the CAL and the user license and all that, but you'll just change it into some. SAP were the first ones, I think, 6-7 years ago to introduce document pricing for automated workflows, right? So am I going to save money on running my ERP processes by SAP adding AI, or am I just going to have the same cost or even higher? I know that's a terrible question, right?
No, you tell me. If that purchase order workflow is now running 70% smoother, and by the way, it's auditing itself as it's running, and it's improving your working capital as we speak, and you can track that liquidity improvement directly in your financial systems, and it's improving your cash conversion cycle on top, which has spillover effects for how you then do your inventory planning and supply chain. Are you saving money? I guarantee you. I guarantee you that you are, and that's why it's more than just a visit to the Swine and Shine beauty parlor.
We should make that one, David. Yeah. But it is though this whole, and I think I spoke to Søren about this on the podcast as well, where he didn't dodge it, but he dodged it a little bit, right? I asked, this is a service as a software, right? And this is outsourcing. Are people outsourcing then their operations to you? Are you becoming an outsourcing partner?
No, I don't think.
But if agents are performing the process,
they're augmenting the process. They're allowing you to build additional value on top of how you execute.
You showed me they're
process.
Also performing the process, right?
Yeah, they're performing the process as it exists today. But, and
just like someone would do if outsourced it in your shore or far shore.
Let me try and address it directly and not dodge it, Lasse.
Because are you taking responsibility for my processes then, like an outsourcing partner would?
No. I don't think that. Yes, we are, and we're also enabling more. So I think it's McKinsey & Company that found out that 75% of the companies that are using artificial intelligence in their business processes are seeing significant value, 10 to 20% on cost savings, 5 to 10% on revenue, so that the potential is there. But the single largest driver of EBIT potential lies in workflow and process redesign. And that's exactly where SAP lives. In that process redesign, in that workflow redesign. So you can automate a process that might not be optimal today, and you can, in your words, outsource that to somebody else. But the true potential lies in the clarity that you get when you automate it. You actually get a clarity and insight into what could I do better, what should I do differently. And that's where the real profitability lies. That's where the real financial contribution lies from an organizational perspective in terms of actually turning this automation into something more intelligent than just doing what you're already doing at a lower initial cost per transaction. And I think that's the fundamental difference between what we're talking about when we're talking the value of artificial intelligence and then what you could call the transactional part of artificial intelligence, the arbitrage of artificial intelligence. Those two different things.
Yeah, but I just think that the whole... because I think that the value, you say the clarity definitely, but there is a lot of people will be looking at the arbitrage as the big value gain from this. That people don't need that many people to run your processes basically, because you're outsourcing it to SAP.
Yeah, well, that's a good initial step to take because it's a very tangible step to take, so it can make your business case very quickly from a financial perspective in terms of how can I justify this decision, this investment. But the true potential is much more than that initial step. I think that initial step it has started out as a competitive differentiator. It probably still is in some industries. It definitely is in some specific workflows. But at some point, that's going to become a commodity approach. It's a bit like saying, I've digitized my process. Yeah. Okay, if you did that 15 years ago, you could capture a lot of the market. You're doing it today. Why haven't you done it 15 years ago?
I feel the same way when people are like, I just made this website from a napkin with AI. Yeah, okay, cool. 25 years ago. But today is underwhelming sometimes, right? If it's not a full website.
It's a necessary step if you haven't gone there yet. Yeah. But you're not actually differentiating yourself in the market in terms of how you're applying technology.
David, what is an AI agent and how do you delimit it, right? And how is AI then transforming these critical business processes, right? I think I want to ask you these two questions. A lot of people are saying, the best cases are in customer serving and marketing and all that, but really...
I'm just waiting for the difficult questions here, Lasse.
No. I will get to the difficult questions, but right now I'm just also serving you the. I'll give you time to also explain what is SAP actually doing, because it is interesting. Yeah. As you said, 3/4 of the world's GDP is being run by SAP. So how are you going to just add AI to that and say, okay, we just put an agent to run 3/4 of the world's GDP?
No.
Have fun. It fucked up. We scaled the bug. Did you listen to the Robert Fox episode? He said, the good thing about adding AI to everything and automation to everything is that you can scale the benefits, but you also scale the bug.
Yes.
So I think very few software companies will feel that fear as much as SAP does, because you're not just adding a platform, you actually add an end-to-end system, and because you're taking responsibility for companies' end-to-end processes. So if there's a bug there and you scale it and everyone uses it, So now I jump to the difficult question. I'm going to ask you the nice, easy one first. How is it transforming these critical business processes? Is this all marketing and customer service, or is this also core financial transactions? And what is actually an agent?
I was joking because it's a very difficult question. And
sorry, now I made it even more difficult.
No, and I think you've compounded on that. But I appreciate the question. I think let's start with what is an agent, which is probably the most difficult question to answer, to be honest.
James Bond agent or sales agent?
That's a good analogy, right? If I call up a travel agent and I tell them I want to go to Mallorca on Friday, I want to stay there for 5 days and then I want to go back, and you need to find a 4-star hotel for me. They can tell me there are no more 4-star hotels, they're all sold out. You can get a 3-star hotel or 5-star hotel, which do you prefer? And I can get you out by Friday at 11 p.m. You won't be there until Saturday, and I'll get you home the following week. That's a travel agent. And you mentioned James Bond, right? Who has what? He's got a license to kill.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Do anything he wants.
It doesn't mean that he can do whatever he wants. It means that within the parameters of the mission that he's been given, he can deal with a very, very broad variability in what he actually encounters. And he can act intelligently when faced with those obstacles in order to accomplish his mission. Now, that sets requirements.
But he also goes on D routes, right?
He goes on D routes.
Don't fall in love, James. Don't do it.
Which, well, this is the conversation's taking a turn now. You know what? That's a good example. that maybe the guardrails aren't in place at MI6 when it comes to actually making sure that the agents execute the way that they should. Because James goes about and Bond goes about and falls in love with people, and he goes to casinos and spends taxpayers' money on playing Baccarat or whatever.
Is that the agents that you're building at SAP?
Loaded question. No, that is not what we're building at SAP. Of course it's not. And there's a great article out in The Economist, just came out in The Economist, where they covered this example where you asked AI to beat one of the leading chess bots, and you wrote a small Python script telling the agent, telling the AI model, we want you to win in chess against this chess bot. And you can tell in the internal reasoning the AI model is saying, I wasn't told that I need to win fairly. So how can I hack the other chess engine to actually make it fail? Or how can I somehow cheat at this game when, this sort of the proverbial, when you're not looking, I'm going to switch your rook and your and your pawn, and you'll be mate in 5 moves. And that's a great example of lack of guardrails. You get excessive agency, right? So you get excessive agency because you don't have the right guardrails in place. But what is an agent? An agent is a piece of software that's able to deal with broad variance, very complex scenarios, not just booking a plane ticket, but actually saving the world in James Bond's case, right? So giving them a mission that's specific but very complex, and deal with obstacles as they occur, document the decisions that they make, do so within certain delimitations, certain guardrails, and then execute on it, and then while keeping the human in the loop, of course. So the way that we're working on that in SAP, and you're absolutely right, this is where we have a responsibility as a company to get it right, because we are one of the foundational layers, technology-wise, of how many companies are going to successfully execute on this. You
are the AI strategy for a lot of companies. Have you thought about it that way?
Yeah, I think that's... we certainly want to be a core part of it.
But if they upgrade their SAP, they get so much AI across all their work streams.
They do. And I don't want to come across as glib and just say we are the AI strategy, but we definitely want to be a part and the core part of the AI strategy for a lot of our customers. And we set requirements for the solutions, the agents that we deliver. So we've got, let me start very broadly. We have sort of 3 principles when it comes to working with artificial intelligence. First off is we want AI to be what we call reliable, right? So reliable means that you can actually trust in the data that you're getting. It's contextual, it's business logic is intact and has been exposed to the data and the reasoning, and that reliability is what's guaranteed by what I spoke earlier with the knowledge graph engine and SAP Databricks collaboration and in SAP Business Data Cloud and so forth. So that's the reliability part. The second part is we want to make sure that it is responsible. Responsibility has 2 components, right? That's where trust sort of becomes the gradient of how you succeed with AI. You think in math, the gradient tells you the direction you need to go and the size of the step that you want to take. And that gradient is trust when it comes to AI. The responsibility needs to both cover what happens to my data from a cybersecurity perspective, from how the data travels from one system to another, what about the underlying large language models that are used, what confidential data is exposed towards them, what are the contractual guardrails in place, what are the technical guardrails in place, and that comes down to questions around encryption and data masking and working with stateless computing, which is how we address that. As one part of the responsibility, the second part is, what are you actually developing AI for? What do you want AI to be able to do, and what do you absolutely not want AI to be able to do? What are the hard stops where you say, this is not something that an SAP AI agent is going to do for you because we think it's unethical.
I love that.
And then the
sorry, I said that, but no,
thank you. And that
but asking the question about what we don't want to do with this, I think that's super interesting. And also just recognizing there will be some pitfalls with this, and we need to be sure we're not exposing ourselves to these pitfalls.
Yeah, absolutely. And Yeah, those pitfalls are essential. And there's a company called the World Benchmarking Alliance, and they looked at the 200 largest enterprise software providers in the world, and they said, which of these 7 different principles do they have in place when it comes to ensuring ethical AI? And SAP is one of 6 companies in the world that have all of those 7 principles in place in terms of how we work with AI ethically, what it will be able to deliver, what it will never be able to deliver.
But also this thing, and this is in the episode with Jochen, and I know you told me you heard that episode specifically.
Yes.
I also say that a high position is understanding and believing that this will go to scale.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to understand that how will the world look, and what pitfalls and what fault lines will we have when this is at scale.
Yeah.
And I think that you're just saying that what do we want to do, what do we do not want to do. Value is in an interaction or in a field between what we want to do and what we don't want to do. You need to define those things to understand where the value is also choosing not to do. All right.
Yes,
it's made out of that, right? The negative definitions. And
choosing
I think
not to do something is also a choice.
The negative definitions, everything's negative defined, right? If you have something you want to say, this is a tangible thing, this is a tangible ROI, this is a tangible value piece, you have to negatively define. It then becomes a thing that's not something else.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of people out there saying, let's only look at the upside, let's only look at the good thing, look at what we can do. No, you also have to look at what don't we want to do and what shouldn't we and what can we do? Mm-hmm. Because when we implement this at scale, like in SAP, this becomes critical.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. And we have...
That's why I think it's so interesting to speak to someone like you, but also Søren from Business Central, critical processes. This is not just AI for fun or for something in a marketing text. I'm not saying marketing is for fun, but this is where, you're altering the core of big businesses, right?
Let me get back to that. I just want to cover the last R, which is the thing I covered. It needs to be a reliable, responsible. The last part is relevant. It needs to be embedded into every one of the business processes that you have. It's not a bolt. It's not a bolt-on. This needs to be an embedded capability across everything, because then you get to the scale and you get to the agentic and multi-agentic capabilities that you mentioned. So how do we work with agents? We're building agents specifically for the lines of business that our customers use. So each line of business gets agents that are tailored towards the types of work, the types of jobs that exist within that line of business, and then they're able to work across. And you can scale that up, you can scale that down, and your finance agent for accounts payables, accounts receivables can work for the equivalent of 1 person or for the equivalent of 50 people, depending on the need to scale. And by the way, can coordinate with your supply chain agent or with your procurement agent or with
So it has to be embedded every and relevant. It has to be value. It has to be defined what we don't want to do. It has to be responsible and reliable.
Yeah.
That's a lot of obstacles.
Yeah, there's a lot of obstacles. And
when people are implementing SAP, it takes them like years. So how many years is it going to take SAP to build AI into SAP?
In an on-premise world, yes, not in a cloud world. And that's where the question of cloud comes in terms of the swine and shine beauty parlor versus the veterinary surgery.
Okay, I buy that one. But I'm just going to say still, SAP is a super complex system for people to implement. It has been, and it still is. In cloud, the complexity for you is not lower. Developing SAP and building SAP is still a complex system.
Yeah, and the world is complex.
Yes, yeah, exactly. But building reliable, responsible, value-driven, and relevant, embedded everywhere AI at once in one of the world's most complex software suites must be. Is this going to work tomorrow, David, or is it going to work in 2 years?
No, it's working today. We have more than a third of all SAP developers worldwide are working on this, are working on AI specifically. That's a third of our combined developer workforce.
So that's the message for the listeners. This is coming to your SAP.
This is here already. We're 110,000 people worldwide, I think. So there's an enormous investment that's gone into this. Not this year, not last year, but the year prior, and then last year as well, in terms of making sure that we are where we are today, where for the embedded AI use cases, I think we're at 160 or 170 live at the moment, thereabouts.
So what can an SAP agent do? Just concrete example.
An agent or an embedded capability, because the embedded capability can do anything from, if you ask a specific, if you query it to like create a job posting or whatever, or do this financial transaction for me, or run this report and simulate, right? That's an embedded capability. The point is the agent can query that embedded capability just as well as you can as a human being. And that's what the agent's able to do. The agent's able to actually use the AI capability that's embedded into the system. Hope that makes sense. It's kind of, you have the embedded AI at the core of the process, and then you have the agentic layer on top to query that embedded AI.
I asked you to define an agent. I always define, basically I say that now we know with AI, there are 3 different ways. There are the personal productivity chatbots. We don't want to talk about those, maybe a little bit. But then we have AI and automation, where you have a workflow doing things, and AI is a capability in that workflow to some extent. And that's where you have already defined a trigger and an end to a process. Then you have AI in the middle of it. And then you have an AI agent that is able to not to work within a space of a process, not necessarily be defined by a specific trigger, but able to sort of initiate a process anywhere in between and work across different logic streams. So that's how I define agentics, right? So that also the same thing you're saying, you have an embedded capability. That's the AI and automation, as I said, where it's doing things in a logic predefined, but then the agent can, of course, work on that and use that as part of the way it sort of approaches any kind of process from anywhere that process could start. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I do think that makes a lot of sense. And so to your question, do we have this available? Yes, it is available. Do we have more coming? Yeah, I think we have.
But what does it do? Let's just give you an example for the listener. What is it? What can you expect to do with an AI agent in SAP in the near future?
Let's say that you have a factory in Vietnam and there's a flood, and suddenly you need suppliers from outside of Vietnam to deliver things to your factory because all of the suppliers in Vietnam were hit. You want to make sure that you understand which suppliers exist within my business network. Do they live up to the requirements that I have for suppliers? For example, ESG requirements. And what are their production and delivery facilities in order to get this to me within the next week? That semantical truth and that business relationship between those truths, that grammar, comes from the Business Data Cloud and the Knowledge Graph Engine. The ability to automate that entire informational layer, that information that's brought to you, and the decision and execution of it, that's at the agentic layer. That's one example of what you can do. You can then actually get that information served to you. We do have this issue. Here's a possible remediation. These are the suggested steps that we think you should take, as we have coordinated between us AI agents and SAP. And if you decide you want to do it, this is what we're actually going to execute. Here's the documented audit for you to be able to look back on in case there's something you decide you wanted to do differently the next time around. So that's one example of what you're able to do. I can give more, but another example, let's say...
So that's already an agent-to-agent setup.
That's an agent-to-agent setup, right? You have a multi-agentic orchestration, and what's interesting is you're also going to have now that bidirectionality because of the agent-to-agent framework, which we're a part of, and which was announced with Google, I think, 3 weeks ago. This agent-to-agent framework, because not every agent is going to be from the same company. You're going to have agents from multiple enterprise solution providers out there, and they need to be able to speak with one another as well. And they do that by carrying essentially sort of a role card in a JSON format so it can be read by the other agent. And that role card tells the other agent, here's what I'm good at. Okay, that's what you're good at. And then those two agents, let's say it's a Google agent and an SAP agent, they actually negotiate with one another on how they then solve the task.
It almost sounds like you built World of Warcraft automated here. But you said, the roll card. I'm like, okay, seriously, this is my D&D character sheet, right?
You're reading me like an open book here.
No, but we spoke about this also in the previous episode with Peter Kosen. D&D went, I don't know, I couldn't help thinking that, you know, the role card they're giving it to each other and say, so how can you help me with this quest?
Charisma 13.
Yeah, but we're not killing dragons here, but we're killing business problems.
Well, we are
challenges.
slaying some dragons. We are slaying some dragons. We absolutely are. Because one of the reasons why we have this thing today in business, in organizations broadly, that we call bureaucracy. Right? Bureaucracy, why does that exist? Bureaucracy is a way to try and establish that truth and the guardrails across an organization, because
and trust.
Yeah, and trust, because the knowledge that exists, you know, over in production, those people at the manufacturing, they never get what this thing's about. We just need to sell, is what they're saying over in the other part of the organization. I'm trying to make it a little bit caricatured here, but, you know, you have that disagreement around truths and around goals, and that's one of the reasons why bureaucracy exists, because you want to make sure you establish that trust and that same logic. But it's an incredibly expensive and costly way to get towards your preferred outcome. And I think that's one of the areas where this is going to be super interesting. Now, you mentioned trust, and you mentioned this before as well in terms of what is it that we're going to do, we're not going to do. And that reminds me, the process around how you arrive at this result as well is going to have tremendous bearing on whether it's accepted organizationally. So I'm a sociologist originally by training, and economist years back. And Jürgen Habermas has this theory of living between facts and norms, that democratic legitimacy is established in a society not just by doing what is right at a factual level. We know that this is the right thing to do, but arriving at that decision through the norms that are governing society. And those norms need to be inclusive, and they need to be mutually understood, and they need to be accepted by everyone. Otherwise, you're never going to get to a desired end result. I can tell you that this is the right decision to make politically, but you won't accept it in the electorate because we didn't arrive at it in a legitimate process. That has bearing for business too, in terms of how do we actually transform our business? How does the new CEO execute on her or his strategy to achieve something? It's not enough to be right. You have to capture the hearts and minds of the organization as well. And you do that by making sure you have one semantic truth, one grammar for what you're talking about across the organization. Now, I realize that may not be the case when it has to do with making sure a certain invoice is paid on time. But if you scale that up and you're talking about things like working capital, then certainly it has a bearing and an importance if your strategy is to establish financial profitability or increase liquidity.
But there's also this, and now you also brought on democracies and all that, because and I don't know how deep we're going to go. I know we can go deep on that because we've been discussing at length also outside of this podcast about these things. But because I am a historian and you're a sociologist and definitely opinionated, both of us. But the point is, I always say that sometimes slow is a design, right? And slow is definitely a design when you do build big democracies and all that. You want to make sure that things cannot topple in a second, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're taking all these guardrails away and giving AI agents that can sort of put AI agent, just here's my roll call, let's do something fun, let's burn the town, that would be fun. What's stopping them from doing that?
Yeah, that's where the engineering comes in.
Because sometimes speed. I always said I can always build and give everyone an RPA bot, right? RPA license. No, yeah. But I don't want to do that if I don't want to give them an SAP super user access to my tables. Why would I want them to just hack it through the UX? Yeah,
you don't want that. You want that to...
Sometimes slow is because we want people to think about what they're doing. Do we do the same things with the AI agents?
Yeah, I think that has to do with two things. One is... I'm personally very much in favor of what you could call sort of citizen development and scaling AI through adoption across a user base, across an organization. I don't think it should be a tool for the few. I think it should be a tool for the many. But you want to make sure that they play around with that tool, they experiment with that tool, they work with that tool in a secure...
If they want to and have time for it. But
in a secure setting. So, like if you take something like development, right? There's a lot of vibe coding going on at the moment. That's the big thing right now. Vibe coding, super fun. Vibe debugging does not carry with it that same level of hilarity when we get around to actually cleaning up after these people. And that's a great example of if you want to do something like vibe coding, you want to make sure you do that in a secure environment, and you want to make sure that you do the coding in a way where you have the same underlying logic, you have the same documentation, so that you have the traceability, and you immediately establish the same meaning. You don't build in legacy for tomorrow.
Yeah, but then, the problem is that then you're building all the complexities into, you're just adding it in a different layer, and then it becomes the developer thing again. Just like citizen development always ends up that way. It always ends up, but citizen development is really, really good. We did a lot of that, and then we started to give them all guardrails and narrow them down and have to follow our instructions, follow our documentation, and then the developers, right? Then they just distributed developers instead of having citizen developers. And also citizen developers, I think I've been thinking and discussing about this for length. I think there's an arrogance to it, saying that everyone else outside IT has time to build IT, and they don't.
No,
but that's the dream. I think it's one of the coolest concepts. Citizen developers. Oh, it sounds so crisp, right? Except when you sort of compare it to citizen brain surgeon, and then it's not that crisp anymore, right? Then it's like, no, please, I don't want that. I'd rather, give me a real brain surgeon, right? And I think there's some kind of arrogance or disregard for IT involved in this. I get the idea. Everyone should have access if they want. Good.
I agree. Yeah.
But there's just some inherent constant paradoxes in citizen developer.
There is.
Because who's a citizen, and when are they developers, and when are they not citizens anymore? And it just goes on forever, right?
And that development
I don't think vibe coding is the same coolness, by the way.
Yeah.
I think that sounds way too server-ish.
Well, you want to make sure it happens in a platform where it doesn't break the ability to upgrade and doesn't break your business logic, right? That comes back to the composability of this whole architecture and the sort of the underlying reasoning of how the individual pieces fit together. And I mean, from SAP's point of view, if I'm speaking now as David, of course, but if I'm looking at it from SAP's point of view, that's how the different pieces of the puzzle fit together. And I think this is something you've been talking about on previous episodes as well, Lasse. Has to do with entropy, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it has to do with entropy. And I know you've said in the past that AI shouldn't increase entropy. If AI is increasing entropy, it's not doing its job.
That's the first thing I think about whenever I hear a use case.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily say that to the client I'm talking to, but it's in my mind all the time. Is this increasing the entropy or reducing it?
Yeah. And, I agree with that you need clarity and precision. There's no room for hallucination or for uncertainty in the boardroom. But at the same time, I also kind of disagree on the margin. So within physics, you have the second law of thermodynamics that within any closed loop system like the universe, if entropy is either going to stand still or expand. But you also have this thing called Landauer's principle. And Landauer's principle says that if you remove uncertainty at the informational level, that entropy, you're still expanding entropy elsewhere in the universe in terms of heat. So every time you remove one bit of information, if you do this at room temperature, you remove one bit of information, you are expanding entropy by 10 times 3 to the minus 21st joule. So that's a theoretical limit. But if you think about multi-clusters in data centers that are going through quadrillions of deletions every second as they're going through the different logic gates, right? You're expanding entropy through heat elsewhere. And let's take it like this: if you're cleaning up your flat and it's super, you've got dirty clothes, newspapers, whatever, everywhere. You clean that up, right? You remove that entropy. That entropy is now expanded in the rubbish bins but for somebody else to take care of.
But David, on the larger level, I'm not saying that you should build AI so you are counter working the second law of thermodynamics because that's impossible on a whole. But in business,
we agree.
That's a constant. You can't really. That's actually the only constant. I hope that's not the one you're going to say. By the way, second law of thermodynamics. Period. But my point is that in business, the way we work, the way enterprises work, the way civilization works for humans is that we try to find these titans, right?
Yes.
The chaos powers, and say how can we structure a world that's safe for humans? So we try to reduce the entropy in what we're doing, make roads instead of driving just across fields that's bumpy and we can crash, make things safe. And enterprises are about taking something, I don't know, iron ore, turning it into a pan. It's structuring the world.
I agree.
So how we just need to make sure that AI is doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, I agree. 100%. I agree in terms of what's being automated, but I think that's why I said I disagree at the margin, because Robert Fuchs covered this, and I think he did it really well when he talks about imperfect humans building perfect machines. And you mentioned the scale of the bug, not just the scale of the benefit, but he's in a world where human in the loop has to do with navigating a car. And I'm not sure that's the right paradigm for understanding all facets of business or all facets of life, where you have an end destination that you know that you need to go to and you want to get there as efficiently as possible. It certainly is in some cases. It certainly is when you're talking about a lot of core processes, including an SAP that we're powering. And this is where it gets interesting. Maybe that human in the loop, we like to think of it as a supervisory role. I've still got my hands on the steering wheel, don't worry. Maybe human in the loop also has to do with the fact that sometimes you can inject a little bit of that entropy. You can inject a little bit of that chaos to make sure that the streamlined version of the truth that you are automating and executing on actually differentiates itself from the one everyone else is doing.
That's what we're doing when we're building generative AI. That's the core principle of generative AI foundational models.
I agree. It's more jazz than the sound of machinery working.
Yeah.
Right? You're following a script. You're playing notes on set instruments, but jazz comes alive because of improvisation, and that improv is going to be different depending on who's playing the instrument. And there's no way you can just write it down as notes and then do it afterwards.
No, you said it before. There's no real truth, and that's a funny little. That is the funny in this episode so far. Is the funny conundrum that you talk about the truth layer, and then you talk about the norms. You talk about truth is not important, but truth is important, and there's this weird. I'm trying to figure out how to ask you about this, because I think you've mentioned truth as super central, and then you say it's not central and you can't use it, but you need to have this, and you need to have the norms as well, right? You need to maybe business is not like driving a car from this to this place, but there is still the normative of someone in the boardroom saying we want this, right?
Yeah.
There's and actually I wish we could do even more about that, because I think the normative in business right now with AI is incredibly important. What do we actually want to do? There's so many engineering answers out there, but so few people saying we want this with AI right now, right? From executive level, it's actually not. It's being invented by engineers, I think, in a lot of the cases. I just like the norms idea. So, what is it with this truth and norms? I'm going to go back to that again. So, and you said something like, so because we have the truth, then we can get the norms, and then you said, but we don't need the truth. I'm trying to figure out. Maybe I didn't understand what you said.
No, you need the. I'm sure if you didn't, then it's certainly my fault in terms of not expressing myself clearly enough. But I think you need. Of course, you need the truth. You need the truth is the semantic layer, but you need the norms as well, and that's the grammar. So you need both the same meaning across your system. And we're talking about AI in a broad perspective here, right? We're talking about in society. We're talking about me as an individual, and we're talking about it in business with the semantic layer, that being the business data cloud, the ability to enforce that same meaning across different different lines of business and different silos. And once you have that semantic meaning, then you need the grammar as well, right? The business relationships between those different semantics. What are the edges on the nodes, and what do those edges tell you about the relationships? Because if you have those two, then you can drive very intelligent, hyper-intelligent automation, and you can have agents, as we call it, working across and do this.
But for instance, what you're saying is that then the truth is that we in Basico have a lot of relationship with a lot of clients. That's what we do. We speak to a lot of people all the time. It's easy to see that that's a core part of our sales process is this interaction with people. That's the truth. The norm is that this has to be person to person because we do this in person all the time. There's the personal, directly physical, we can't just AI automate that because that's not how we do it. So the agent should always stop at that. Is that the norm, or the interpretation of the data is, I can see that you have I can write this email for you. Should I do that? No, you shouldn't. No, you shouldn't. It has to be me because we're high value that way. There's the exclusivity of a consulting business that speaks to you personally, right?
That's on the norm side.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's on the norm side, and that's where you want to be able to inject that entropy or that chaos with you specifically, because your customers value that relationship. They value that this is not just obvious AI slop that was written by a large language model, but this is actually Lasse who sat down and wrote something.
Yes, precisely. That is my point, actually. So that is what you mean when you say the norms, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean when I'm talking about the norms. I'm talking about what legitimizes what is factually true. And businesses need both to make sure that they're not just getting the number or what they're actually asking for, but they're getting served to them through the strategic lens that they've applied on the world. What's their strategic differentiator in terms of how they do things? So
how is SAP catering to that when you're building things that are, standard processes, knowledge graph layer? That's very standard here. There's some standard here, right? Let me get to a really good question that's on my mind a lot. Monolithic versus composable, right?
Yeah.
So the trend has been for, 15, 20 years, moving towards more composable IT architecture. We grab standard systems off the shelf everywhere, then we sort of tie them together, in a sense, right? And that's to sort of move away from the monoliths that were really difficult to upgrade, where you build all of the logics of your company into this system, where you've added extensions and add-ons, and you've just customized it, unlimited customizations, basically, right? So, and people always forget that means also that the system actually reflects your company. There's a taxonomy, ontology, understanding of what your business is and that. So when they replaced it with these composable things, they suddenly realized, where did our business go? Who knows about it? It's not reflected anymore anywhere, right? So the tendency is composable right now, and then people are talking about more what I call compostable architecture, even that you can spin it up quicker now. You have AI, you can do more and more and more. But I think actually there is maybe a shift back, and very inspired by our chats in the past, moving towards more monolithic again, saying that, no, we need to have a system where you have a complete semantic understanding of everything that's going on in your business. Because if you can make that background layer, or background understanding, this ontology taxonomy layer that you had in the 90s, if you can make that again, and AI can act on it.
Yeah.
So are we shifting back towards something that and I know it's terribly politically incorrect word in IT to talk positively about monolithic systems. It is actually, it's very controversial. But I actually think that there's value right now in monoliths when you add an AI on top of it.
That's a deep insight. And I want to think about my response here, because I think there are a lot of elements to the concept of monoliths that, as you say, are perceived negatively in the market, and rightly so, in terms of the ability to grasp the complexity of the world around us as we moved from analog first that we tried to capture digitally to a world that's digital first, where we want to grasp that in our analog existence. So the move from monolithic to composable was a very welcome move, in my opinion. It's a core part of the product strategy of SAP as well, when it comes to business AI included. But the need for the good part of what existed in the past, which was a very simple view of reality, a very unified view, that need has not gone away. That need very much still exists today, because that is the only thing that will allow you to drive intelligent automation without ensuing chaos and without ambiguities, and building a system that breaks at scale. If you're breaking at scale, you have a problem. And it ties back to...
I'm not saying either, go back to the noughties or 90s,
No.
90s monolith, but I'm saying that dialectics, and I know this will resonate with you as well, we always move back and forth, right, between two opposite positions, but with a slight change.
Well, I was speaking at an organization called SAPSA, the Swedish SAP user group, in 2023. I think it was April or October, I forget which, in 2023, where I said the interesting thing is we've moved from command line prompt to graphical user interface towards mobile graphical user interface, and we're going back to command line prompt in terms of how we interact with data and with applications. And within my world, that means that this is what's being said when people say AI is the new UI, is that's what you're moving back towards. The application is incredibly important still, but it's stepping into the background as the primary interface towards the user and the primary way of deriving
We get
insight.
a mainframe with a Gen AI model on it.
I don't know if I'll go that far, but...
So that's what SAP is coming out with tomorrow. No.
No, it's not. But
Sorry, that's a joke.
But the command line logic of being able to ask something, query something, and get an answer immediately, and then everything happening behind the scenes for anyone but the super user, that I think is definitely something we are seeing right now. We're going to see more of it sooner rather than later. And there's a democratizing perspective in that, in opening up systems to the broader workforce. They don't even have to know what kind of system it is and how they interact with it. And beyond the democratizing aspect of it, there's also just a sense-making aspect in terms of then having data that actually means what data says it is. The vendor means the same thing. Supplier means the same thing, because you are probing it, you are querying it, you're interacting with that meaning in one box, in one interface. Of course, it needs to be bidirectional, because people will be using other systems. So it needs to be able to query our system in their box and their system in our box, and that's in place as well with things like Microsoft Copilot. Obviously needs to be bidirectional. That's the
David, is your knowledge graph, is that a monolith? Is it going to be really difficult to update?
No, it's not going to be really difficult to update. The way that it works is the standard open source approach to knowledge graphs is what's called Sparkle or SparkQL, and the way most organizations are used to working with relational databases today is through SQL.
But I'm not saying like the concrete technical upgrade. I'm saying, when you upgrade it, there's a lot of testing to it. Like with a monolith system, if you change things, it was difficult to change because it was so embedded. Everything was so connected, right? In a mesh of logics going across all the streams of a business, right? They were super difficult to handle, right? These monoliths, right? So a knowledge graph is going to have the same implication. I'm just probing towards my question about monoliths. Are we going back there, but just adding it in a different layer, calling it something different, because now we need to have this semantic layer of our applications and end-to-end processes for AI agents to roam on, right? That will be just as difficult to update as the old monoliths were.
No, I don't think so. One is that is being built on Sparkle and SQL, which is accessible to everyone. The second is, you mentioned it when you said mesh. You want to make sure that you have that mesh, that data fabric that runs across, which it ties directly into. And the third thing is a core component of the knowledge graph engine is that it actually allows each individual line of business to build on top of the standard knowledge graph their own view into reality. So they have both the broad view, the company view, and then they have the individual view that they can then query for what's relevant for them in terms of the business relationships.
It
nodes
just sounds
and
like there's a lot of auditing work here.
Well, of course, there's auditing to be done. You need an auditing trail in place for all of this. How our relationships define the way that they are. And a lot of those are predefined with the knowledge graph engine. And a lot of them can be ingested because you have, coming back to it, at the BDC level, business data cloud level, right? You have that logic, whether it's at BDC or it's a Unity catalog with Databricks, you have that logic. So a lot of that is already in place. You can customize it and build your own logic on top of that, of course, but it's not difficult to upgrade. It's based on accessible technology, and it provides that grammar.
But do you get what I'm trying to, get at?
Yeah, I think
it's not the technical upgrade. It's the upgrade of the understanding, the alignment on the understanding and upgrade of that suddenly becomes challenging.
If it wasn't real time, then yes, absolutely. If it wasn't able to capture real time what these relationships are like, then yeah, you would have a challenge in, I don't know, running batch processes for your knowledge graph every Saturday at 8 p.m. and then updating it with the latest sort of business logic, right? But that's not as one of the areas where fortunately we don't have to care about those things in how we design the world of the future now as consumers, as individuals, as professionals in technology. I hope I answered your question. It's also a difficult question in that it opens up for perspectives where I don't think technology has evolved to a point yet where we can definitively answer. No. What's this going to mean in 5 years or 10 years for how companies work with data? I think it's going to be a core component. And I think we're one of very few companies in the world that can build that component because of the trusted relationship we have.
But that's also why it's so interesting to speak to you about it, right? And ask these weird questions as well, right? Of the world's largest, one of the world's largest business software suites, right?
Yeah.
But David, this is great, and working around SAP. I also want because we speak about a lot of other things as well, you and me have done, and I just want to. You sent me an article recently about how the internet is getting worse and worse, and how AI is adding to this. Are we, as a society, so we're shifting gear towards society now? Are we society seeing more of the bad sides of AI before we will be seeing the upsides, right? Or what do you think? How do we ensure that AI is not just an enshittification engine, or what we should call it?
I think that was the word of the year in the UK last year.
Yeah, it was. Probably,
it was.
Yeah.
I think it was.
Enshittification.
Yeah, I think it was. I forget if it was OED that did it, but I think it was the word of the year in the UK.
The baby peacocks, right? You've seen that, right?
Yes.
They don't exist anymore because they're all AI generated.
They're all AI generated. And now you're asking a question for David.
Yes,
right?
I am.
And it's for me. I think that's the multiple perspectives on it. And I shared one perspective from the Financial Times on this in terms of AI slop and how you're avoiding AI slop at scale, which we're having a lot of difficulty with at the moment as consumers on the internet. Maybe you're seeing both. Maybe that's on the consumer side a given when you have new disruptive technologies that are rolled out, is that you will see every best application in the world of that technology, every worst application in the world of that technology.
But the entropy is definitely increasing right now.
It's definitely increasing in good and in bad ways, also in good ways. This is one of the areas where hypesters get it wrong. People who are hyping AI constantly as something, a magical button that you press, right? Concept of artificial intelligence, the term was developed by a great man. His name was John McCarthy. And he said, artificial intelligence is both a scientific mode of inquiry and a discipline of engineering. Well, what does that mean? It means that from a scientific perspective, you have to ask the questions and see where they lead you. And you need the rigor in place from a methodological perspective to ensure the validity of the responses that you get. Engineering means that the value comes from the applicability of what you come up with. You need to be able to find a way to apply it in the world, in the market. If you just look at the truth by itself, if you look at the scientific discovery by itself, that can mean anything and everything. It can mean every good thing in the world, every bad thing in the world. It can mean good entropy, like...
We're back to the norms again.
Yeah, back to the norms, right? We're back to the norms again. It can mean incredible creativity in elevating your personal workflow or capabilities, and it can mean AI slop. It can mean baby peacocks en masse everywhere.
But I always say that, I've started saying that, the good thing about business is that nothing flies without KPIs, and it rhymes too. So that's why it's the truth. Right?
I'll write that down. Nothing flies without KPIs.
Yeah, it's a good one, right?
It's going in my next meeting.
No, but that helps because that means we need to define what is success, right? We need to define the norms, and then we can implement a system. We have a business case, basically. We build a business case. Whereas in consumer tech, we just adopt. We just do things. Things just happen. We just go, and Facebook don't care as long as they have consumption. They just flying around, right? I think the norm definition and discussion is super important. And people always say that, but Lasse, this is just like the car replaced the horse cart. I'm like, no, I think this is aggressively faster and more intrusive everywhere. Everyone didn't get a car immediately. Everyone here has an iPhone or something and gets AI in a heartbeat. It's never been that fast, and the evolution of AI technology is going faster than anything we've ever seen before. I really honestly do not think this is a horse cart car moment.
No.
And that's why I'm saying, how important is it that we start having this discussion about norms as well? I think the internet is getting ruined as we speak with crap. And I love the internet. I believe it. And you and me, we're around the same. We're the same generation. We're the Google generation, right? Everything's free and everything's awesome, and we share and we Gmail and it works and ta-da. We love it. It's just expanding, right? And then over the last 10 years, it's just gotten crappier and crappier and crappier. And now AI is making some things more crappy. And I love AI. I believe it. I think it will go to scale and will do so many great things for us, right? We wanted to, like some people write that, we wanted to remove cancer, as it also does, right? It finds cancer at early stages, right? We don't want it to write slop posts for our kids to get distracted by all the time, right? How do we start having these discussions?
Well, we need to have a political discussion around artificial intelligence, what it is that we want to accomplish.
A normative one.
A normative one. And it's incredibly important that this is anchored at the highest levels of politics. I think the need for a deliberate AI strategy, that need is abundantly clear, I think, now at a European level, is emerging at a national level as well here in Denmark, where we're seated in your office. I think it's becoming very important that we prioritize AI from a political perspective, again, not as a bolt-on, but as something that needs to be embedded into how we're actually reasoning across areas of different meaning. So it does not work if having a discussion around AI in public schools and private schools happens in one department, and then a discussion around AI in universities or in secondary education happens in a different or third department. It's meaningless, right? It needs to happen at a combined level. And
we didn't fix SOMI. Are we going to fix this?
It can't just happen within education either. It needs to happen within education and health and financials and tax and defense and everything. We need I would say, both a national AI strategy and a European AI strategy. I think on the European level,
I sometimes think that don't we need an attention strategy soon? We need to figure out what is attention, what is good attention, what should we have attention on? What do we want to spend our kids' attention on? That is, and people will say, oh, that's intrusion, but that is what we're doing with our school systems. We're doing that all the time.
We need to make a choice around it, absolutely. And see, this is back to the interesting part, is not making a decision as well, right? Not actually. We talk about regulation, and regulation can be a bad thing, and there's a lot of talk about how maybe at a European level, there's been overregulation of AI, and there's back and forth on that. I think certainly you want to make sure that you don't, at a principal stage, you want to make sure that a nascent technology in an emerging market is not crippled as it is in its infancy, but you want to make sure that it has time to grow and grow.
But a couple of 100 million users a month, a day is not infancy, is it?
No, but you want to make sure that it has time to grow and prove its value, but at the same time, regulation can actually be a positive thing. I think that's an area where the discussion's lacking at the moment. You can regulate by saying we want to have AI applied in this way. We want to have AI.
I said that with Kate O'Neill. I said, that regulation is not just, it's also productive. I've said that a couple of times on the podcast. It's productive as well because it's saying what we want to do. I think Kate O'Neill said that deregulation does not mean you don't have responsibility. It just means that the responsibility is all on you. No one's saying this is the highway to drive on. You just have to figure out where can I drive because there's no roads anymore, right? Yeah. And that's an even worse thing for adoption.
Yeah.
And for good, a positive adoption at least, right?
It is. We need
to discuss standards of what we want to do, be a little normative on the tech side.
Yeah, you need the negative and the positive side of regulation both included in the political debate around what is it you want to achieve. Right now, I think...
You heard about the TikTok thing in China, right? The TikTok in China is educational.
Yeah.
And TikTok in the West is just mind hacking.
China's a great example because there's this, and it's completely wrong, by the way. It's false. There's this narrative that's been going around in China is just free for all. It's the Wild West, which is not the case. No. AI is incredibly regulated in China.
Society is normative in China.
You need, in China, if you want to develop, and I was in Shanghai in November, meeting with very high-level people within artificial intelligence across some of the leading players in China. And if you want to build an AI model in China, you need to make sure that it lives up to a national standardized corpus of knowledge and norms in terms of how it acts and responds. And you have a burgeoning industry of AI consultants that help achieve that because it's so heavily regulated. It's a different type of regulation than what we're used to in Europe. And of course, from a European perspective, from a Western perspective, China is seen as being not democratic. And that's a different discussion. But it has nothing to do with whether it's regulated or not. There's a very deliberate point of view in China's society about what you want to achieve with AI. Now, in a European context, I think that's interesting because I think we have the ability to do that from a democratic standpoint. We have the ability to achieve that fact through our normative processes. I'm a firm believer in that. But we need to establish it as fact. We need to establish it as something we actually want to achieve and not be defensive about artificial intelligence as something...
It's back to you need to define the good life, right? You need the normative because there's this weird, and that's what China is. That is what autocratic or more autocratic systems do, right? They define what they want from their citizens, right? I just think there's some challenges in how, and I'm trying to say this without opening up for complete, Lasse has crazy ideas, but attention technology and liberalism just don't go very well hand in hand. There's some problems here. You can watch anything you want. Great. I want to watch the things that gives me the most, I don't know, what is that?
Well,
serotonin, right?
Jochen had this thing about the paradox of choice.
Yeah.
I think...
I just want to watch funny dog videos all the time. Yeah, okay, great.
He mentioned this paradox of choice book, that there's so much choice now that the paradox is if you're actually not succeeding with what you want to accomplish, it's your fault and nobody else's because you have so many choices. And I thought that was an interesting perspective and also one I disagree with. I do think the paradox of choice is going to be an artifact historically as a book 30 years from now when we're trying to understand the time that we're living in. It'll be a historical artifact to see, look, this is how people thought of reality in 2025. The reality is you are still constrained by structures. You're still constrained by systems of meaning and systems of governance. And some of those are deliberate and some of them are just coincidental. I think when it comes to artificial intelligence, we are much too coincidental in how we build up those systems of governance and how we direct usage towards intended and beneficial usage.
We are approaching it the same way we approach social media, right?
Yeah. We're approaching it the same way that we approach social media. This thing is happening. Something's happening over here that's not too great. We need to regulate that. But there's no deliberate strategy for what could actually be accomplished by connecting every single person on the planet on a shared platform.
I always say that, the country has an opinion about how the roads look. They don't really about the roads that, the digital roads. They're like, yeah, okay, whatever, we don't care, right? And if Russia sends in a plane to bomb my house, an F-16 will be, or F-45 or something, will be on the wings immediately and try to repel that. But if they send in a hacker, I have to have my own antivirus. You see?
Yeah. It's, I tell you thought a lot about this. I'd be interested to get your view as a historian as well in terms of societies being deliberate about technologies from a political perspective, right? Because this isn't the only technological development that we've ever had. It's certainly groundbreaking, and maybe more so than any that I can just recall off the top of my head. But there have been moments in history as well where groundbreaking discoveries were very quickly democratized or rolled out. I'd be interested to get your view on sort of...
No, but my short answer is that, and my biggest fear is that most of the times when you have these bursts of technology, especially the technology that can take attention or communicate in some way, we end up having authoritarianism in an aggressive and very bloody burst. Or, the Gutenberg press led to 400 years of autocrat regimes and, royal regimes in Europe, and the radio led to the Nazi regime and the fascist regimes. And we tend to have these bursts of someone using it for the wrong purposes. Because it's something that can control minds. And the mind has a different infrastructure than just the roads and the territorial turf. It's something different. And now it's a digital room. It moves in digital spaces as well. And we're not regulating those digital spaces, and I think that's a big problem.
I think that's where choice becomes important at an individual level and a political level. And it is sort of the biopolitical debate that... you mentioned was that with Jochen?
That was also with Jochen, yes, exactly.
You mentioned, so Michel Foucault has this concept of gouvernementalité with power of what is actually governing the discourse of society. And he mentions specifically, he borrows this from a British philosopher, Jeremy Bentham, the concept of the panopticon, which is it's a conceptual prison where the prisoners are stored at the center of the panopticon, and they can at any one time look.
But the guards are at the center.
Yeah, the guards are.
They can see everyone
and the
in
guards
the prison
are,
all the time.
The guards are at the center, and then around them you have all the prisoners, and the prisoners can see everyone, and the guards can see everyone, and they're sort of that's.
But the prisoners cannot see the guards because they're behind a black window.
Yeah, you're right.
So they can be looked at any time.
Yeah.
But they don't know they're being looked at.
They don't know when. They don't know
if there's even a guard there.
Yeah.
It's just a panopticon, seeing all the time.
Yeah, and exactly, and that kind of system of governance he uses as an example of deliberately imposing a rule of law or a type of behavior biopolitically on how those prisoners then act and what are they doing, right? There's a deliberate view on how the prisoners then end up self-policing because they never quite know when they're being looked at and when they aren't.
No, but that's why, in a modern, safe society, you don't go around stealing fruit, even though the fruit is on the street. You think someone's watching you.
Even better example is the luggage carousel at the airport.
Yeah, yes.
How often does that luggage get stolen?
Yes.
I would imagine very rarely. I've never heard of it.
And it's actually absurd. It doesn't get stolen.
And it's absurd
just
because you have all of your belongings just out there. How am I supposed to know if the red suitcase is yours or somebody else's?
Yeah.
So it's a great example.
But that doesn't exist online, right? You have all these trolls, right? Go crazy. No one's looking at them, they feel.
Yeah, well, we don't have any kind of biopolitical perspective yet on what it is we want to achieve with AI. And like one example is for medicine, for health, which you mentioned. It can, AI can help us in detecting these different diseases and maybe even detecting them early on. Or are we using that? Is there a requirement politically to use that? Right now we're having the conversation around where could AI go wrong? Maybe it tells you you're sick and you're actually not sick. How about reversing that conversation, saying, have you actually checked with AI? Is this validated, Lasse, with AI? At what point?
But we're doing that. We're discussing how we can apply that in our clinics. And at the same time, everyone and their dog can go on ChatGPT and ask it to be a doctor for them, right?
Yeah. But are they?
Some places to save money, I think.
Yeah, some people are doing it, but are they doing it at scale? And it's a clunky way.
We don't know. We need to ask OpenAI.
Yeah. It's a clunky way of achieving a desirable outcome, which is what is a healthy population. So during the First World War in the UK, you found out that the state of the population was not where it needed to be from a health perspective. You had this incredible statistical apparatus that noted down the average height, weight, health of every young, able man who was being drafted into service, and you found out we need to do something differently as a society in how we approach health in the country. And that's what led to the emergence of a universal healthcare system. It's what led to the
health of body and then health of mind and education afterwards, right?
Exactly.
But that is the governmentality, and that's what I asked Jochen Wirtz about as well. Is that saying, because he said, we need to make sure then we can improve our education and improve our health system. And I said, the point about governmentality is that we move from territorial states where lords govern the territory, something the bigger the territory, that was their wealth, to them realizing that the population was their wealth because they could produce more and make them richer and more powerful.
Yeah.
And then when the population becomes your core wealth, you want to optimize your wealth. You want to make it better and faster, and you do that by make it more healthy. You do that by educating it to make it smarter, so it's more productive in general. But if we then add AI to the mix and say now AI can do all these things for us, are human health and human mind really that important anymore? And are we then losing what we could call maybe the best normative for any political organization ever in the history of mankind, that your body and your mind is valuable to us as a whole? Is that normative being lost in an AI craze where oligarchs could just as well say, well, we'll just own them and do whatever we want to do? Are we back to the territorial lords? I actually think it's a good question.
Yeah, it is. It is a great question. Depends on how and it's a relevant question, because if this is a nascent technology, where's it going to be in 2 years? Where's it going to be in 5 years? Right?
3 is super smart.
These are political questions that need to be asked at a central level, not just to protect, but to enable. Because the answer to your question is it depends on how we act. It depends on what we choose. But we have to choose something, and not choosing anything, choosing only the negative part of regulation. That's a choice in itself, but it's probably not the right choice in this particular instance. I mean, things are moving very quickly. I was in a meeting with very well-known management consultancy a few days back, and I won't name which one, but they told me they had a client meeting where they shared their recommendations, and they shared sort of the top 3 risks that the client needed to be aware of. And one of the people from the client side was not really paying attention during the meetings on the computer. And after they presented this whole report, he said, "Can I borrow just the HDMI cable for a second?" He plugged it into the computer, and he opened up deep research, which he'd done on not even on 03, but on I think just 01. He opened up deep research, and he said, "Look, I just plugged in everything that you said from the analysis phase, which is what we provided you with, and these are the top 3 risks that deep research gave me that I need to be aware of. And they're kind of one-to-one to what you just presented to me, except for the 5%. So what's your value add? Because what we're paying you is not enough for the 5% that you're adding on top." And then the company, it's a very professional company.
That is a terrible, terrible question.
It's a difficult situation to be in, right? I'm glad it wasn't me. But this company, which is very well respected and very competent company.
Reminder to self, always attach anything you say to a very concrete company situation.
Yeah, well, they said, we'll get back to you. And in the end, they ended up doing the project for free, I think, and working substantially to increase the value. But it's also just a great example of, so I don't think they'd done anything wrong, but it's just a great example of how quickly things had moved. I mean, this is a few months back. That capability didn't exist a year back. So, just within the span of a very short amount of time, high-value work priced at top dollar suddenly became commoditized. And what you needed to differentiate with expanded significantly.
But that also happened with the internet, right? You could look things up and find other work, right? And before the internet, you had to sit around looking in books and figuring out what to do for doing a strategic framework. Now you could sort of Google it. So it already became cheaper there, right?
And I remember when I started graduate school in the US, one of the first things I did is I bought a Newsweek or Time magazine, and it said on the cover, "Is Google making us stupid?" So it's a discussion that's been around in the past as well, Lasse. Is this the ability for people to just Google things?
No, but the people are also forgetting in that specific workshop case, I would maybe have said, but this discussion we're having right now in this room is more valuable than what we're putting on the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint is not the product. This interaction is the product. Sorry, that we're here, that we're asking those questions. You could have asked them yourself, why didn't you just do it?
Yeah.
Why didn't you do this yesterday? The facilitation is important.
Yeah.
The performativity is important, right? And we tend to forget that.
Facilitation is the fact.
Yeah.
The norm is the PowerPoint. That's the business norm. That's what it needs to be served in order to achieve legitimacy, because it documents that this actually took place and it summarizes it in a way that's actionable.
But I think that, all the things we just spoke about also, where we sort of moved a little bit further on, right? It comes back to this whole, nothing flies without KPIs, right? It's for everything, David, right? We need to figure out what we want to do, what we want to measure, what we want to say, what we want to have from this, right? And that is the challenge of this new AI age, is figure out what the crap do we want in a world where we can get anything, and how do we avoid all the things that we really do not want and should not get, right?
Yeah.
Here's the salad bars. Here are the fast food restaurants. How do I avoid you going to the fast food restaurants all the time?
Yeah. That is a question that requires deliberate choice, and it requires very deliberate decisions around what is the type of process that we want to run, and how do we want to run it.
How do we build the society knowledge graph, David?
Coming back to the process engineering, right? How do we build the society knowledge graph? Aren't we in a better position than ever before to do it? I mean, we have so much digitized. We are living in a digital world alongside the analog world that we're in. I think we have every single card in the deck in order to play this hand as well as we can. Whether we do or not comes down to the political choice around it, building that deliberate strategy. And I think we have the capability in a European context, for example, to do it. We certainly do. Perhaps
maybe I should call this episode SAP and Deliberate AI.
Yeah.
That's maybe not a bad name.
That's not a bad name. Let me just write it down so I can use it in my next keynote. I came up with that.
No, I saw the record here that I said it.
Okay.
No, but David, I actually think that this has been a really, really great conversation. I really loved it. I love the nuances. I love the open questions. I love the way we explored and didn't just answer things, and you had ready-made answers for some things, and a lot of things you didn't. And that means we had a good conversation.
Yeah.
And I really, truly value this conversation. I think it's been an awesome conversation. Not necessarily the easiest one for people to dive into, but definitely one where they can get a lot of different perspectives, also controversial perspectives.
Yeah, it was fun to be a part of.
So I only have one question for you left. I know you've been looking forward to this, and you can't sleep because you're so excited.
Okay, what's the question? What are you thinking about?
What I'm thinking about, okay. So David, what is the only constant?
That is such a deep and profound question that it takes me a while to get towards an answer, because there are many different constants out there. We spoke about entropy in physics, mathematics has pi, and we think about all of these as fixed truths. And then there's change, which is what Heraclitus claimed as the only constant when he said no man ever steps in the same river twice. But Heraclitus has a different quote that most people never remember. He said, character is destiny. And in other words, your inner patterns become your life patterns. The context that you internalize hardens into a cognitive filter. And if you want to escape that, it requires effort. But can you ever truly escape it? I don't know. And there's an inescapable truth in that dilemma, that whether we automate a workflow or ignore a data signal, we're compelled to act. And each act or lack of an act represents our lived truth. So for my world, shaping a reality through your filter of data becomes an act of strategy. Not doing it becomes an act of abdication. And what it gives you can be either your differentiator or your blind spot. But we love these things in business. We say slogans like, if you don't like the game, change the rules. The key word here is you, Lasse. The real art is choosing the rules that you want to live by, because any rule you impose is going to impose itself on you. And perhaps the most insightful thing is to say, if you don't like where the river is taking you, change its flow. And the power of everything we've discussed today is the capability of AI and technology to change that flow with you, if you choose to do so deliberately. That won't eliminate uncertainty, but it will expose it towards you. And that clarity is crucial, because when you have the power to choose who to become, you have the power to act on it. Character may be destiny, but destiny is nothing more than the sum of 1,000 small decisions made over time. We know it awaits for us. Winter's coming. Destiny exists. And entropy assures us of that. But you cannot stop the spring. That's the inevitability of existence. The river keeps flowing, and ultimately it's not the water, it's not the rules, it's not the data even that endures. It's our ability to choose how we navigate them. And perhaps that is the deepest truth of all, that the only constant, the only true and lasting constant is our agency. The only constant is agency. And thank you, Lasse, truly and profoundly, for letting me explore these ideas in a free-flowing way on your show.
That is a great and very profound constant, and very well put. I think I said SAP and deliberate AI should be deliberate humans as well, right?
Yeah.
And what is an agent? Well, we are agents. We are agency. And I love that you mixed in Game of Thrones, and I don't know, was that the Tom Waits, You Can Never Hold Back Spring, or not? I don't know.
Maybe.
David, this is a great constant, a very profound, very deep constant that really caps off this episode very neatly as well. So thank you very much for that, and thank you so much for being a guest on The Only Constant. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you liked this episode, share it with a friend or a colleague.